Elias crouched low, his boots grinding silently into the brittle, crystalline soil of Kavara 7's shadowed moon. He could feel the cold seep through the thin fabric of his suit, the oppressive chill biting at his flesh as if the moon itself were alive, hungering for warmth. A broken wasteland stretched in all directions, jagged obsidian spires clawing skyward like skeletal remains of a long-dead civilization. Above, a sickly yellow sun cast fractured light, its glow muted by a web of ash-gray clouds that churned with a restless, almost malevolent energy. He checked his tracker for the 5th time in as many minutes, though he already knew what it would say. Static, he muttered under his breath, voice muffled behind his breather mask. The device had failed him the moment he landed, replaced with meaningless flickers of interference. "Something's jamming us," came a voice through his earpiece. The words were smooth and deliberate, tinged with a slight accent Elias couldn't place. Zira's voice. He glanced toward her, only to find her standing a few paces ahead, her figure outlined by the dim, pulsating glow of her stealth shield. She stood unnaturally still, her crimson eyes fixed on the horizon, as though she could see something he couldn't. She always seemed to be looking past him, past everything, as if the world itself was just a fleeting distraction from something greater. "What kind of something?" he asked, keeping his voice low. Zira didn't respond immediately. Instead, she raised one slender hand and traced a slow arc through the air. Her fingers glowed faintly, leaving behind trails of light that quickly faded. Her other hand rested on the hilt of a blade strapped to her hip, its metallic surface etched with alien symbols that Elias had learned not to stare at for too long. "There's a presence here," she said finally, her voice barely more than a whisper. "Old, watching us." Elias tightened his grip on his rifle, though the weight of the weapon suddenly felt small and insignificant. "You're not exactly filling me with confidence," he muttered. "Good," Zira replied, her lips curving into a faint smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Confidence gets people killed." The silence that followed was suffocating. Even the wind, which had howled relentlessly when they'd first landed, had died down, leaving the air heavy and still. Elias scanned their surroundings again, his nerves fraying with each passing second. He didn't like this moon. It felt too empty, too quiet, as though the land itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. "How much further to the facility?" he asked, his voice breaking the stillness. "Not far," Zira replied, without turning. "If the coordinates are correct, we should see it over the next ridge." Elias frowned. That wasn't reassuring. The coordinates had come from a shadowy client who paid in cryptic messages and untraceable credits, promising an astronomical reward for retrieving the artifact. No details, no backup. Just him, a dead tracker, and a partner he barely knew. Not for the first time, Elias wondered why he'd taken the job. He was no stranger to danger, but this was something else. Zira's presence alone was unsettling enough. She wasn't human, at least not entirely. Her skin had an otherworldly sheen, her movements were too fluid, and her eyes. Those damn eyes. He'd caught her staring at him once, and for a moment he'd felt as though she were peeling away his layers, seeing parts of him he didn't even know existed. "Why did you agree to this?" Elias asked, more to distract himself than out of genuine curiosity. Zira tilted her head slightly, as if considering the question. "It's personal," she said at last. "That's vague." "So is your reason," she countered, turning to face him. "You think I don't see it? That you're running from something?" Elias bristled but said nothing. He wasn't about to share his past with someone who'd likely slit his throat the moment it suited her. Instead, he pressed on, his eyes scanning the jagged terrain ahead for any sign of movement. And then he saw it. A shadow, just at the edge of his vision, slipping between two spires of obsidian. It moved too quickly to be natural, vanishing as soon as it appeared. Elias froze, raising a hand to signal Zira. "What is it?" she asked, her tone sharp. "Thought I saw something," he said, his voice low. Zira's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, The faint glow behind her pupils intensified. "We're not alone," she said quietly. Elias felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. He tightened his grip on his rifle, his heart pounding against his ribcage. "Can you be more specific?" Zira shook her head. "Not yet, but they're watching us." "Fantastic," Elias muttered. As they crested the ridge, the facility came into view, a hulking structure of black metal and glass, half buried in the moon's surface. It pulsed faintly with an internal light, like a sleeping beast exhaling in its slumber. Surrounding it were scattered remnants of machinery, their twisted forms half consumed by the rocky terrain. Elias scanned the area, his stomach knotting. There was no movement, no sign of life, and yet he couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. "Let's move," Zira said, her voice steady. She started down the ridge, her steps silent despite the rocky ground. Elias followed, his every sense on high alert. As they approached the facility, he noticed something etched into the metal walls, symbols that matched those on Zira's blade. "Care to explain that?" he asked, nodding toward the markings. Zira's expression darkened. "No," she said simply. Before Elias could press further, a sudden sound shattered the silence, a low guttural growl that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Elias spun, raising his rifle, but there was nothing there. The growl grew louder, more insistent, reverberating through the ground beneath his feet. "What the hell is that?" he demanded. Zira didn't answer. She was staring at the facility, her eyes wide with something Elias had never seen from her before. Fear. "They've found us," she said softly. Before Elias could ask who they were, the ground beneath him erupted, and the world was consumed by chaos. Elias slammed into the ground, his breath knocked from his lungs as shards of crystalline rock sliced through the thin fabric of his suit. He rolled instinctively, clutching his rifle, his ears ringing from the deafening roar of whatever had just torn the earth apart. The pale, fractured sky above tilted sickeningly as he forced himself upright, his heart racing. The ground where he'd been standing moments ago was now a smoking crater, its edges glowing faintly with molten energy. Chunks of debris rained down, each impact sending tremors through the unstable terrain. Elias scanned the area frantically, searching for Zira. "Zira!" he shouted, his voice raw and desperate. "Here!" came her voice, sharp and steady. She emerged from the haze, her cloak swirling like liquid shadow around her. She moved with inhuman grace, her crimson eyes gleaming even through the thick dust. In one hand, she held her unsheathed blade, its alien symbols glowing faintly with the same energy that pulsed from the crater. "What the hell was that?" Elias demanded, coughing as the acrid smoke stung his lungs. Zira's gaze flicked to the crater, then to the jagged spires around them. Her expression was unreadable, but her grip on the blade tightened. "Not natural," she said curtly. "We've been detected." "By what?" "Not what," she corrected, her voice low. "Who?" Before Elias could respond, a second tremor rippled through the ground, this one more deliberate, more focused. The spires around them began to hum, a deep, resonant frequency that vibrated in Elias's chest like the tolling of some ancient bell. He turned toward the facility. Its black metal walls now shimmered with a sickly green light, and the symbols etched into them pulsed in rhythm with the hum. "They're waking it up," Zira muttered, more to herself than to him. "Waking what up?" Elias demanded, stepping closer to her. Zira didn't answer. Instead, she pointed toward the facility's entrance, a massive circular door that was slowly grinding open. Beyond it, an ominous red glow spilled out, casting long shadows across the desolate landscape. "We have to move," Zira said, already striding toward the door. "Wait!" Elias grabbed her arm, feeling the strange, almost electric sensation of her skin through his glove. "We don't know what's in there." "If we stay out here, we'll find out the hard way," she snapped, her eyes locking onto his. "This place isn't just a facility, it's a trap, and we're already inside it." Elias hesitated, every instinct screaming at him to turn and run. But where? The moon was vast and barren, and whatever forces were at work here clearly weren't bound by the same rules of nature he understood. "Fine," he said finally, his voice tight. "But if this goes sideways—" "It already has," Zira cut him off. Together, they made their way to the entrance, the red light growing stronger with every step. The air grew heavier, thicker, as if something unseen was pressing down on them. The symbols on Zira's blade glowed brighter, pulsing in sync with the ones on the walls. "Why does your sword match this place?" Elias asked, his tone accusatory. Zira didn't look at him. "Because it's part of the same system," she said simply. "What does that even mean?" She stopped abruptly, turning to face him. "It means this isn't my first time dealing with something like this," she said, her voice icy. "Now stop asking questions and stay alert." Before Elias could press her further, the ground beneath their feet shifted again, this time accompanied by a low guttural sound that seemed to come from the very walls of the facility. It wasn't just a sound. It was a voice, deep and ancient, speaking in a language Elias couldn't understand. "What is that?" he whispered, his blood running cold. Zira's eyes narrowed. "It's awake." They stepped through the doorway, into a cavernous chamber lit by veins of red energy coursing through the walls. The air was suffused with a faint metallic tang, and the hum of the spires outside was now a deep, resonant thrum that seemed to emanate from the very heart of the facility. At the center of the chamber stood a massive obelisk-like structure, its surface covered in the same alien symbols. It pulsed with a sinister energy, and as Elias approached, he felt a strange pull, as if the obelisk were calling to him. "Don't touch it," Zira warned, her voice sharp. "I wasn't planning to," Elias muttered, though he couldn't take his eyes off the thing. Zira moved past him, her blade raised defensively. She circled the obelisk, her movements cautious, her expression unreadable. "This isn't just a facility," she said finally. "It's a vault, and that," she nodded toward the obelisk, "is the key." "The key to what?" Elias asked, his unease growing. Zira didn't answer immediately. Instead, she pressed her hand against one of the glowing veins on the wall. The symbols on her blade flared brightly, and for a moment, the entire chamber seemed to shudder. "To something that should have stayed buried," she said at last. Before Elias could respond, the guttural voice from earlier returned, louder this time, echoing through the chamber. The walls trembled, and the red light intensified, casting wild, flickering shadows. "We're not alone," Zira said, her voice tense. Elias turned, his rifle raised, just in time to see a figure emerge from the shadows. It was humanoid, but its features were distorted, its limbs too long, its eyes glowing with the same malevolent red light as the obelisk. "Get ready," Zira said, her blade humming with energy. Elias didn't need to be told twice. As the creature lunged toward them, he fired, the sound of the rifle's discharge echoing through the chamber. The creature staggered but didn't fall, its glowing eyes locking onto him with a predatory intensity. "Great," Elias muttered. "It's going to be one of those days." As the creature closed in, the chamber erupted into chaos, and Elias couldn't shake the feeling that whatever they had awakened was only just beginning to reveal itself. The chamber was a storm of chaos. Elias dodged to the side as the creature lunged again, its unnaturally long limbs cutting through the air like blades. His rifle spat bursts of fire, each shot striking its target, but doing little to slow the thing down. The beast's red-lit eyes burned with a feral intensity, its distorted, elongated body twisting in ways that defied logic. "Fall back," Zira's voice cut through the noise, sharp and commanding. Elias didn't need to be told twice. He retreated toward her, his back brushing against the cool, glowing wall as Zira raised her blade. The symbols etched into it burned like molten lava, and with a sharp, fluid motion, she slashed downward. The energy from her weapon surged forward, a streak of light that sliced cleanly through the creature. It shrieked, a horrible, otherworldly sound that echoed in Elias's skull. The creature staggered, its body flickering like static before collapsing in a heap. For a moment, The chamber was eerily silent, the only sound, the ragged breathing of the two companions. That was new, Elias muttered, lowering his rifle. Zira didn't respond. She approached the fallen creature cautiously, her blade still glowing faintly. Its body was already dissolving, melting into a viscous black liquid that pooled on the chamber floor. But as Elias watched, something began to emerge from the ooze, a small metallic object, no larger than a coin. "What is that?" he asked, stepping closer. Zira knelt and picked up the object, her gloved fingers curling around it. When she stood, she turned it over in her hand, revealing an intricate pattern of symbols etched into its surface, symbols that matched the ones on her blade and the obelisk. Her expression darkened. "A beacon," she said quietly. Elias frowned. "A beacon for what?" "For them," Zira replied, her voice tight. "Whoever created this place, the ones who left it behind." "Left it behind?" Elias echoed, his confusion deepening. "You're saying this facility, this whole moon, is abandoned?" "It was," Zira said, slipping the beacon into a pouch on her belt. "Until we stepped inside." Before Elias could press her further, the ground beneath them trembled violently, nearly knocking him off his feet. The red veins in the walls pulsed brighter, and the guttural voice from earlier returned, louder and more insistent. "We've overstayed our welcome," Zira said, grabbing Elias by the arm. "Move!" They sprinted through the chamber, the ground shaking with each step. The obelisk at the center began to hum, a low, resonant sound that reverberated through Elias's bones. He glanced back just in time to see it crack open, a blinding light spilling out. "Faster!" Zira barked, pulling him forward. They burst through the facility's entrance, back into the barren expanse of the moon. The spires around them were vibrating now, their hum synchronizing with the obelisk's ominous resonance. Elias's chest tightened as he realized the vibrations weren't random. They were deliberate, coordinated. "What's happening?" he shouted over the noise. "They're calling something," Zira replied grimly. "Something like that thing we just killed?" "Worse." Elias didn't want to stick around to find out what worse meant. They sprinted toward the jagged outcrop, where they had first landed, but before they could reach it, the ground in front of them erupted. Another creature emerged, this one even larger and more grotesque than the last. Its limbs were covered in jagged crystalline growths, and its eyes burned with an intensity that made Elias's skin crawl. "Keep going," Zira shouted, raising her blade. Elias hesitated, torn between running and helping her fight. But before he could make a decision, the creature lunged, not at Zira but at him. He barely had time to react before it slammed into him, knocking him to the ground. Pain exploded in his side as one of its crystalline limbs raked across his torso, slicing through his suit. He cried out, his vision blurring as blood seeped from the wound. "Elias!" Zira's voice was distant, muffled. The creature loomed over him, its glowing eyes filling his vision. Elias fumbled for his rifle, but his strength was fading fast. The edges of his vision darkened, and he felt a cold, creeping numbness spreading through his body. And then, suddenly, the weight of the creature was gone. He blinked, his vision clearing just enough to see Zira standing over him, her blade buried in the creature's chest. She pulled it free with a sharp twist, and the beast collapsed, dissolving into black ooze like the first one. Elias tried to sit up, but the pain in his side was overwhelming. His head lolled back, and he felt the cold, desolate air of the moon against his face. "Stay with me," Zira said, kneeling beside him. "I think I'm done," Elias murmured, his voice weak. "No," Zira said firmly. She reached into her cloak and pulled out a small glass vial filled with a dark, shimmering liquid. "What is that?" Elias asked, his words slurring. "Something that will keep you alive," Zira replied. She uncorked the vial and tipped it against his lips. The liquid was thick and metallic, its taste both sweet and bitter. Elias gagged, but Zira held his head steady, forcing him to swallow. As the liquid coursed through his veins, a strange warmth spread through his body. The pain in his side began to fade, replaced by a tingling sensation that grew stronger with each passing second. His vision sharpened, and his hearing became painfully acute. "What did you do to me?" he whispered, his voice trembling. Zira's expression was unreadable. "I saved your life," she said simply. But as Elias sat up, he realized that something was very wrong. His senses were too sharp, too overwhelming. He could hear the faint hum of the spires in the distance, the crackle of energy in Zira's blade, even the slow, steady rhythm of her heartbeat. And beneath it all, he felt a hunger, a deep, primal urge that he couldn't explain. "What's happening to me?" he asked, his voice rising with panic. Zira met his gaze, her crimson eyes filled with something that looked like guilt. "You're changing," she said softly. Before Elias could respond, the ground shook again, and the guttural voice returned louder than ever. Whatever was buried in the facility was coming, and Elias had a sinking feeling that his transformation was only the beginning. Elias's breath came in short, sharp bursts as he staggered to his feet. The raw energy coursing through his veins was both a blessing and a curse. Every sense was heightened to unbearable extremes. He could see the faintest glimmers of light dancing along the jagged rocks, feel the vibrations of distant tremors beneath his boots, and hear the faint crackle of static that hummed in the moon's oppressive silence. But the hunger, that gnawing, relentless hunger, was growing harder to ignore. Zira moved ahead of him, her blade glowing dimly, her crimson eyes scanning their surroundings. "We don't have much time," she said, her voice low but urgent. Elias clenched his fists, the metallic tang of her blood still lingering on his tongue. He wanted to demand answers, to understand what was happening to him, but the urgency in her tone silenced him. Instead, he followed her through the labyrinth of jagged rock and pulsing spires, the guttural voice from the facility still echoing faintly in his mind. "What's calling us?" he finally asked, his voice rasping against the oppressive air. Zira hesitated, her steps slowing. "Not us. It's calling you." Elias froze. "What do you mean?" She turned to face him, her expression grim. "The blood I gave you, it's not just a cure. It's a bond. A piece of me is now part of you, and that connection has awakened something ancient." The weight of her words settled heavily on Elias's shoulders. "You knew this would happen." "I knew it was a risk," Zira admitted, "but leaving you to die wasn't an option." Elias shook his head, frustration and fear bubbling to the surface. "You should have told me, you should have." A sudden piercing scream cut him off. The sound wasn't human. It was something raw and otherworldly, a chilling wail that seemed to emanate from the very core of the moon. Zira's eyes widened. "They've found us." Before Elias could respond, the ground beneath them erupted. A creature larger than any they had faced before emerged from the rocky terrain, its crystalline body gleaming in the moonlight. Its limbs were long and spiked, its mouth a gaping maw filled with razor-sharp teeth. Elias raised his rifle instinctively, but the creature moved with blinding speed, knocking the weapon from his hands. He barely had time to react before it lunged again, its claws raking across his arm. Instead of pain, he felt a surge of adrenaline, a primal instinct that overtook his fear. Without thinking, Elias lashed out, his fist connecting with the creature's crystalline surface. To his shock, the impact sent cracks spiderwebbing through its body. The creature recoiled, its movements faltering. Zira was beside him in an instant, her blade slicing through the air. Together they drove the creature back, their movements strangely synchronized. For a moment, Elias forgot his fear, lost in the rhythm of the fight. But as the creature collapsed into a pool of black ooze, the hunger within him surged. His vision blurred, and the edges of his world darkened. He stumbled, clutching his chest as an unbearable heat spread through his body. "Elias!" Zira's voice was distant, muffled. He fell to his knees, gasping for air. The hunger was no longer just a feeling. It was a force, a living entity clawing its way to the surface. He could feel it consuming him, twisting him into something he didn't recognize. Zira knelt beside him, her hands gripping his shoulders. "You have to fight it," she said urgently. "I can't," Elias choked out. "Yes, you can." Her voice was firm, unyielding. "This bond doesn't control you. You control it." Elias met her gaze, her crimson eyes steady and unflinching. He focused on her voice, her presence, grounding himself in the moment. Slowly, the heat subsided, the hunger retreating to the edges of his consciousness. As he caught his breath, Zira helped him to his feet. "The bond is a double-edged sword," she said. "It gives you strength, but it also makes you vulnerable. To them." Elias frowned. "Them?" Zira nodded toward the horizon, where the spires were pulsing brighter than ever. "The ones who created this place. They're not just calling you, they're hunting you. They see you as a threat now." Elias's stomach twisted. "Why me?" "Because you're an anomaly," Zira said. "A human with their blood. It shouldn't be possible, but here you are." The ground trembled again, the vibrations growing stronger. Zira's gaze hardened. "We need to reach the core. It's the only way to stop them." Elias hesitated. "The core of what?" "This moon isn't just a facility," Zira said. "It's a weapon, a living, breathing entity designed to destroy. If we don't shut it down, it will wipe out everything in its path, starting with us." The weight of her words sank in, but before Elias could respond, the guttural voice returned, louder and more insistent. This time, he understood the words. "Return. Submit. Become." Elias shuddered, the voice reverberating through his skull. He looked at Zira, his fear mirrored in her expression. "We don't have much time," she said. As they pressed forward, the air grew heavier, the red glow of the spires casting eerie shadows across the landscape. The voice grew louder with each step, and Elias could feel its pull like invisible hands dragging him toward the core. He clenched his fists, fighting the urge to surrender. Whatever awaited them at the core, he knew it would demand a sacrifice, one he wasn't sure he was ready to make. But as the spires loomed closer, their hum resonating with the pounding of his heart, Elias realized he might not have a choice. The blood in his veins wasn't just a bond, it was a curse, and it was leading him to the center of the storm. The core was not what Elias had imagined. It was worse. Beneath the pulsating spires lay a vast, churning mass of energy, a writhing vortex of light and darkness that seemed alive. It roared with a power that shook the very ground beneath his feet, its tendrils reaching out like claws, hungry and insatiable. The guttural voice he'd heard so often now came from every direction, resonating deep within his bones. Return. Submit. Become. Elias clenched his fists, his heart pounding. The hunger within him, the bond that Zira's blood had forged, now surged stronger than ever. The pull toward the core was nearly unbearable, a gravitational force that demanded his surrender. Zira stepped in front of him, her blade drawn, her crimson eyes glowing with fierce determination. "This is it," she said, "the source of their power. If we destroy it, they lose control." But what?" Elias asked, his voice strained. Her gaze softened, tinged with regret. "But it will cost you everything." The words hung heavy in the air. Elias stared at the core, the vortex's light reflecting in his eyes. "Why me? Why not you?" "Because you're already part of it," Zira said. "Their blood is in you now. You're the bridge between their power and this world. If you sever the connection—" She trailed off, her expression pained. "You'll burn out the bond, and yourself with it." Elias took a step back, the enormity of her words sinking in. He had come here to survive, to fight alongside her, to escape the chaos. Now, he was being asked to give it all up. "I didn't ask for this," he said bitterly. "Neither did I," Zira replied, her voice sharp. "But this is where we are. The choice is yours, Elias. You can walk away, try to live with what you've become, or you can end this." The core pulsed violently, the tendrils lashing out, sending shockwaves through the air. Elias stumbled, the hunger clawing at him, urging him to give in, to become. "What happens if I don't stop it?" he asked, his voice barely audible. Zira's expression darkened. "It will keep growing. It will consume this moon, then the surrounding systems, until there's nothing left but them. You'll survive, maybe, but you'll be one of them, a slave to their hunger." Elias looked at her, his chest tightening. He thought of everything they'd been through, the battles they'd fought, the bond they shared. He thought of the blood, the hunger, the primal connection that had both saved him and damned him. And then he thought of the people beyond this cursed moon, the innocents who would never see the storm coming. He straightened, his jaw set. "What do I have to do?" Zira's eyes softened, a flicker of sorrow passing through them. "You need to step into the core, let it take you, but don't let it control you. Fight it, overload it." "And you?" "I'll hold them off," she said, glancing at the shadows gathering at the edges of the cavern. "They'll try to stop us." Elias nodded, his resolve hardening. He stepped toward the core, the heat intensifying with each step. The voice grew louder, more insistent. "Return. Submit. Become." The tendrils reached for him, wrapping around his arms, pulling him closer. He felt the hunger surge, felt the bond with Zira straining as the core's energy threatened to consume him. "Elias!" Zira's voice cut through the chaos. "Stay with me. Stay you." He closed his eyes, focusing on her voice, on the connection between them. The bond burned brightly, a thread of light in the darkness. He clung to it, using it as an anchor as the core's energy engulfed him. For a moment, there was nothing but pain, searing, blinding pain. Then slowly he felt the energy shift. The core was fighting him, but he was fighting back. He could feel its power bending, cracking under the strain. "No!" the voice roared, filled with fury and desperation. "You are ours." "Not anymore," Elias whispered. With a final surge of will, he pushed the core's energy outward, channeling it into the bond, into Zira. He could feel her strength, her determination, her fierce will to survive. Together they overwhelmed the core, shattering its hold. The cavern erupted in a blinding light, the spires collapsing, the ground trembling violently. Elias felt his body breaking, the bond disintegrating, his humanity slipping away. "Elias!" Zira's voice was distant now, fading. "Stay with me." But he couldn't. The light consumed him, and everything went silent. When Elias opened his eyes, he was lying on the rocky surface of the moon. The spires were gone, the core a smoldering crater. Zira knelt beside him, her expression a mixture of relief and sorrow. "You did it," she said softly. Elias tried to speak, but his voice was gone. He felt empty. The hunger was gone, but so was the bond. He was just himself again, weak, fragile, human. Zira helped him to his feet, her touch lingering. "The connection is broken," she said. "They won't be able to use their power anymore." Elias nodded, his throat tight. "And me?" "You're free," she said, though her voice wavered. "But the bond, it's gone. You won't feel it anymore." Elias looked at her, a pang of loss cutting through him. Despite everything, he had grown to rely on that connection, to find comfort in it. Now he felt its absence keenly. "What now?" he asked. Zira smiled faintly. "We survive. That's what we do." As they walked away from the crater, the weight of the moon's silence pressing down on them, Elias realized that his journey had changed him in ways he could never fully understand. He had faced the hunger, the darkness, and emerged on the other side. But as he glanced at Zira, he knew that the bond they had shared wasn't truly gone. It lived on in the choices they had made, in the sacrifices they had endured, and in the quiet understanding between them. And for now, that was enough. The stars seemed colder here, an illusion of clarity against the infinite expanse of black. Somewhere in that void, unseen but felt, danger coiled tight like the hiss of a blade drawn in silence. Commander Lithia Anselai of the Kirash caste, warrior-born, unyielding, stood on the observation deck of the Vindralis, her reflection sharp against the reinforced crystasteel pane. Beyond it lay the frozen ruin of an ancient moon, its surface webbed with cracks that glowed faintly, as though the dying star it orbited had spilled molten veins across its surface. Lithia didn't trust the quiet. "Status report," she ordered, her voice measured, cutting through the low hum of the ship's systems. Around her, her crew moved with the precision of seasoned soldiers, their luminous, dark-hued eyes flicking over displays and readouts. The Kirash prided themselves on discipline and control, and yet the air on the Vindralis felt taut, charged. Her second-in-command, Vadran Kal, approached with the fluid stride of a predator. "No activity detected, Commander. The surface appears abandoned. No power signatures. No life signs." He paused, frowning slightly. "But the readings are strange. The moon is emitting faint electromagnetic pulses, low frequency, erratic, and—" He hesitated, rare for one so unshakable. "Almost rhythmic, like a heartbeat." Lithia turned sharply, her gaze narrowing on him. "A heartbeat? Elaborate." Vadran held her stare, his hesitation melting into grim resolve. "The pattern isn't natural. It's too irregular, too deliberate. If I didn't know better, I'd say it's trying to draw us in." The words lingered in the air, heavy with implication. Lithia's fingers flexed against the hilt of her ceremonial blade. The galaxy was at war, and traps were as common as the stars themselves. The Vindralis had survived countless battles against the Syndral Unity, the relentless enemy faction that consumed worlds and turned them into engines of destruction. This was no time for hesitation, but something about this mission gnawed at her instincts. "Commander," another voice chimed in, a younger officer, Tilya Ray, stationed at the sensor array. "There's more. The signal. It's changing, adapting. It's matching our own scanning frequency." The bridge fell silent, the hum of machinery suddenly oppressive. Lithia felt her jaw tighten. Signals didn't adapt like that, not unless someone, or something, was actively manipulating them. "Prepare a ground team," she ordered. "We'll investigate directly. If it's a trap, we spring it on our terms." Vadran inclined his head, though his expression was tight. "You'll lead the team yourself, Commander." "Of course," she replied, already striding toward the tactical station. "If it's a trap, they'll want a prize worth taking." The moon's surface was a graveyard of jagged ice and razor-thin crevasses, the kind of terrain that could swallow the unwary whole. Lithia's boots crunched against frost as her team fanned out, their movements shadowed by the eerie glow emanating from the fissures beneath. The electromagnetic pulses were stronger here, vibrating faintly in her chest like the ghost of an impact. Ahead, the ruins came into view. They were vast, sprawling, monolithic structures half buried in ice, their sharp angles and unfamiliar glyphs bathed in the sickly green light of the star above. Lithia's breath caught, but she suppressed the reaction. The Kirash were no strangers to ancient ruins, remnants of long-dead civilizations that had torn themselves apart long before her people took to the stars. But this was different. "Scan the perimeter," she instructed. "Mark any structural instabilities. I don't want to end up buried." The team moved efficiently, but as they approached the central structure, a towering spire split down the middle as though sundered by some great force. An unsettling realization crept over Lithia. The ruins weren't just abandoned. They'd been cleared. "Commander." Vadran's voice was low, urgent. He stood near what looked like a jagged altar, its surface etched with strange spiraling grooves. He held up a small device, its screen flickering with incomprehensible data. "This technology, it's still active, barely, but it's interfacing with our systems, as though it recognizes them." "That's impossible," Lithia murmured, stepping closer. Her hand hovered near her blade, an instinctive gesture. "This architecture is ancient, pre-Kirash, pre-human. There's no way it could—" A sudden crack split the air, deafening in the silence. The ground trembled, and for a heartbeat, Lethea thought the moon itself was fracturing beneath their feet. But then she saw it. Shadows moving, shapes emerging from the fissures with fluid, predatory grace. They weren't enemy soldiers. They weren't even entirely alive. And the ambush was chaos. Lethea's blade sang through the air, meeting the first attacker head-on. It was a grotesque amalgamation of metal and sinew, its body flickering with the same green light that pulsed from the ruins. Its movements were erratic, but unnervingly fast, as though driven by instinct rather than strategy. Her team fought valiantly, their coordinated strikes cleaving through the creatures, but for every one that fell, another rose from the icy shadows. Lethea's breaths came fast and sharp, her mind racing. This wasn't a trap. It was something older, deeper, a defense mechanism awakened by their presence. Amid the chaos, a sound cut through the fray, the sharp crack of a human firearm. Lethea's head snapped toward the source, and her eyes locked onto a figure moving through the battlefield with unrelenting precision. His armor was battered but distinctly human, his movements as fluid as any Karash warrior. The man didn't hesitate, didn't falter. His weapon barked again, and another creature fell. "Who?" Lethea began, but the words died on her tongue as he turned, his piercing gaze meeting hers for the briefest of moments. His lips curled into a wry smile, utterly out of place amidst the carnage. "Nice of you to show up," he called, his voice rich with sardonic humor. And then with a flash of movement he was gone, slipping back into the chaos as though he'd never been there at all. The survivors regrouped hours later aboard the Vendralis. The ruins had been left behind, their mysteries intact, but tainted by blood and fire. Lethea stood once again at the observation deck, her reflection dark and somber. The human soldier's face lingered in her mind, a puzzle she couldn't yet solve. "Commander," Vedran said quietly, stepping to her side. "The ruins, we've seen nothing like them before. But that man, he wasn't a phantom. He was real." Lethea's jaw tightened. Real or not, he wasn't supposed to be there, and yet he fought as if this war was his to win. She turned back to the stars, the distant glow of the fractured moon shrinking in the void. Questions churned in her mind, their answers tantalizingly out of reach. For the first time in years, she felt the unfamiliar pull of uncertainty. "Find out who he is," she ordered, "and why he was waiting for us." The Vendralis sailed through the void like a phantom, its engines muted to minimize its signature. Inside, tension rippled through the crew like a coiled serpent, unseen but ever present. The memory of the ruins weighed heavily on them, what they had seen, what they had fought, and what they had left behind. For Commander Lethea Anselai, the questions were like jagged stones lodged in her mind. Who was the human soldier, and why had he been there? What force had reawakened the ancient ruins, and what connection did it have to the war consuming the galaxy? She stood in the tactical briefing room, its dim lighting casting sharp shadows across the holographic display of the icy moon. The glowing cracks and sprawling ruins pulsed faintly on the projection, like the ghost of a living thing. Around her, her senior officers waited, their expressions grim. "The enemy was not the Unity," Lethea began, her voice steady, despite the weight of uncertainty pressing on her. "Whatever we encountered, it was older, more dangerous, and entirely unaccounted for in our intelligence. And then there's him, the human soldier." Vedran Kal, ever the pragmatist, leaned forward. "Commander, are we certain he was human? His movements, his timing, they were beyond what we've come to expect from their kind. And why would a lone operative be deployed to an abandoned moon, of all places?" Lethea met his gaze. "That's what we must determine, but we'll have to tread carefully. Whatever he represents, he's not the only danger out there." The Vendralis rendezvoused with a small human fleet several days later, their shared truce forcing the Karash and humanity into a fragile partnership. Lithia, accompanied by Vadran and a few hand-picked officers, entered the human flagship, Resolute Dawn, with all the measured grace of a predator entering a rival's den. The human captain, Adrian Holt, greeted her with a practiced politeness that barely masked his wariness. His dark eyes studied her, lingering a fraction too long on her ceremonial blade. "Commander Ancilli," he said, gesturing toward the conference table, "welcome aboard. I trust the journey was uneventful?" Lithia offered a curt nod, her expression unreadable. "Uneventful, Captain Holt, but not without questions." As they seated themselves, a holographic display activated, showing a detailed scan of the moon and its ruins. Lithia didn't wait for formalities. "One of your operatives was on the surface when my team arrived," she said, her voice sharp and direct. "He fought alongside us and disappeared just as quickly. Who was he?" Holt stiffened, his jaw tightening. "I wasn't aware of any operatives in that sector. If what you're saying is true, it wasn't an authorized deployment." "Then who authorized it?" Lithia's tone held an edge, her patience wearing thin. "Because someone did, and whoever they are, they've jeopardized this alliance by keeping us in the dark." The room fell into an uneasy silence, tension thick as a coiled storm. Holt finally exhaled, his gaze hardening. "We've had reports," he admitted reluctantly. "Rumors, really, of rogue operatives, special units operating outside official command. Their missions are classified even to us. If your soldier was one of them, then he's working under the orders of someone far above either of us." Lithia's lips pressed into a thin line. The answer only deepened the mystery, and the implications were unsettling. Later aboard the Vendralis, Lithia stood in her private quarters, staring out at the stars. Her reflection in the glass seemed more a stranger than herself, her features carved with uncertainty. A faint chime broke her reverie. "Enter," she said, turning as the door slid open. Vadran stepped in, his expression grim. "Commander, you should see this." He held out a data pad, its screen flickering with decrypted transmissions. Lithia skimmed the text, her eyes narrowing as she read. The messages referenced the ruins, describing their energy signatures, their dormant state, and their potential as weapons. "Who sent this?" she demanded, her voice low and dangerous. "Intercepted from Unity channels," Vadran replied. "They know about the ruins, Commander, and they're planning something." Lithia's mind raced. The Unity was relentless, their strategies cold and methodical. If they were aware of the ruins, it meant one thing. They intended to weaponize whatever lay beneath the ice. The decision loomed before her like a chasm. Pursue the rogue human operative, unraveling his connection to the ruins, or focus entirely on stopping the Unity before they could exploit the ancient technology. The decision was made for her when alarms blared throughout the Vendralis. "Commander to the bridge," a voice crackled over the comms. Lithia arrived to find the tactical display alive with activity. A Unity strike force had appeared on the edges of the system, their fleet bristling with weaponry. "Battle stations," she ordered, her voice cutting through the chaos. The enemy ships moved with precision, their formation tight as they advanced. But something was off. Unity forces didn't launch assaults without overwhelming numbers. This wasn't an attack, it was a feint. "They're distracting us," Lithia realized aloud. "They're sending ground teams to the ruins." "Commander," Vadran said urgently. "If they reach the ruins, they could activate whatever lies beneath. We can't allow that." Lithia's jaw tightened, her mind calculating. The Vendralis would hold the line in space, but she would have to lead a ground team back to the moon. The risk was immense, but hesitation could mean annihilation. "We're going back," she said, her voice resolute. "Ready a strike team." As they descended to the moon once more, the icy surface loomed ahead, its glowing fissures brighter than before. The electromagnetic pulses were stronger now, pounding in Lithia's chest like war drums. The ruins had awakened. Her team moved cautiously, their weapons drawn, every shadow a potential threat. But the moment they stepped into the central spire, They realized the Unity had beaten them there. Figures moved in the gloom, enemy soldiers clad in dark armor, their forms illuminated by the sickly green light of the ruins. But even as Lithia prepared to strike, her gaze caught something else. The human operative was there, standing amidst the Unity soldiers. His presence froze her in place, a surge of disbelief and anger rushing through her. Was he an ally, or had he been working with the enemy all along? The man turned, his expression unreadable, and met her gaze. For a heartbeat, time seemed to still. Then he spoke, his voice calm, almost apologetic. "You shouldn't have come here, Commander." The chamber within the ruins was colder than the void itself, the air thick with the strange, metallic tang of energy barely restrained. The walls glowed faintly with pulsating patterns, glyphs that shifted as though alive, their meanings tantalizingly out of reach. Lithia's breath curled in the freezing air, her blade drawn, every muscle in her body taut. Across the room, the human operative stood amidst the Unity soldiers, a calm, enigmatic presence in the midst of enemies. The sight of him there, unchallenged by those she had fought for years, was a betrayal that burned deep. "You," Lithia said, her voice low but laced with fury. "What game are you playing?" The man, tall, broad-shouldered, his battered armor marked by the scars of countless battles, lowered his weapon slightly, though his posture remained defensive. His gaze didn't waver, steady and assessing. "It's not what you think," he said, his tone devoid of the arrogance he had shown in their first encounter. "If you want to survive this, you'll listen to me." Vadran moved to Lithia's side, his plasma rifle trained on the operative. "Commander, he's stalling. We should eliminate him and the Unity forces before they have a chance to act." "Wait," Lithia said sharply, holding up a hand. Her instincts warred against her training, but something about the man's presence, the calculated calm in his voice, made her hesitate. "Explain yourself. Now." The operative nodded slightly, acknowledging her demand. "The Unity soldiers? They're not here for conquest, not this time. They're here because they don't understand what they've found. They think they can control it." Lithia narrowed her eyes. "Control what?" He gestured around the chamber, the faint hum of the ruins growing louder with each passing moment. "This place, these ruins, they're not just artifacts. They're part of something far bigger, older than the Unity, older than your people, older than mine." A ripple of unease passed through her team, but Lithia held her ground. "You expect us to trust you because you have a story? You fought alongside us once, and now you stand with them. Tell me why I shouldn't kill you where you stand." The operative's jaw tightened, his expression hardening. "Because if you do, you'll doom us all." The room trembled, the glyphs on the walls glowing brighter as the ground beneath them shifted. The Unity soldiers suddenly moved into defensive positions, their weapons raised not toward Lithia's team, but toward the center of the chamber. Lithia turned just as the floor split open, a column of energy erupting from below. The force of it was staggering, a hurricane of light and sound that sent her team reeling. From the depths of the column emerged a construct, humanoid in shape but impossibly tall, its body a blend of gleaming metal and translucent energy. Its movements were both graceful and mechanical, its face an unreadable mask of shifting glyphs. "What is that?" Vadran hissed, his voice filled with awe and fear. "The Sentinel," the operative said grimly. "A guardian left behind by those who built this place. It was dormant until now, but the Unity's meddling woke it up, and it doesn't care who started the war. It sees us all as intruders." The Sentinel turned its gaze toward them, the glyphs on its face flaring brighter. Lithia's instinct screamed danger, and she barely had time to shout a warning before it moved. The construct was a blur, faster than anything she'd ever seen. Its energy blade cleaved through the air, cutting down Unity soldiers with surgical precision. The room erupted into chaos as both Lithia's team and the Unity forces scrambled to respond, their weapons useless against the construct's energy shield. Lithia ducked beneath a sweeping arc of the Sentinel's blade, her own weapon striking sparks against its shield. She could feel its power resonating through the chamber, an overwhelming presence that dwarfed anything she'd encountered before. "Fall back!" she shouted, her voice barely audible over the din. Amid the chaos, the operative fought his way to her side, his movements precise and controlled. "You can't destroy it," he said urgently. "It's tied to the ruins. If you kill it, you risk destabilizing the entire structure." "And what do you suggest?" Lethea snapped, her blade narrowly deflecting a strike that would have taken her head. "Deactivate it," he said, his gaze locking onto hers. "But to do that, you'll have to trust me." Lethea hesitated, the weight of the decision pressing down on her. She didn't trust him, not fully, but the Sentinel was an enemy they couldn't defeat through brute force. "Vadran!" she barked. "Cover us! We're going for the control core!" Her second-in-command didn't argue, his rifle barking as he laid down suppressing fire. The Unity soldiers, momentarily united in their desperation, joined in, their combined efforts barely slowing the construct's advance. The operative led her deeper into the chamber, where the glyphs on the walls pulsed faster, their patterns converging around a central console. "This is it," he said, his fingers flying across the console's surface. "The core interface. I can shut it down, but you'll have to keep it off me." "Convenient," Lethea muttered, positioning herself between him and the Sentinel, which had turned its attention toward them. The fight was a blur of motion and sound, Lethea's every strike timed to deflect the Sentinel's relentless attacks. She could feel the construct's strength with every clash of her blade against its shield, each impact reverberating through her arms. Behind her, the operative worked feverishly, his focus unbroken despite the chaos. The glyphs on the console shifted rapidly, lines of energy converging as he manipulated the ancient system. "It's not just a weapon," he said suddenly, his voice tight with urgency. "It's a key. These ruins, they're part of a network. There are more out there, all connected. And if the Unity gets their hands on them, less talking, more deactivating," Lethea snapped, driving the Sentinel back with a calculated series of strikes. With a final command, the operative slammed his hand onto the console. The glyphs flared brilliantly, then dimmed. The Sentinel froze mid-strike, its energy blade dissipating as it crumpled to the ground. The silence that followed was deafening. As the dust settled, Lethea turned to the operative, her blade still drawn. "You've bought yourself time," she said coldly. "Now tell me everything. What is this network, and what's your part in it?" The man straightened, his expression unreadable. "My name is Captain Dax Rain, and if we don't destroy this network before the Unity can claim it, this war will be the least of our problems." The ruins pulsed with a strange ethereal energy that seemed to hum in time with the pounding of Lethea's heart. The Sentinel's lifeless shell loomed in the shadows, its once terrifying presence now reduced to an eerie stillness. Yet, the weight of what they had discovered pressed heavier on her shoulders than any battle could. The glyphs on the walls continued their rhythmic dance, shifting with a purpose she couldn't decipher. Every line, every curve of light seemed to whisper secrets older than the stars themselves, secrets that, according to Captain Dax Rain, connected countless ruins like this one across the galaxy, a lattice of dormant power waiting to be awakened. Dax stood beside the deactivated control console, his expression grim. His rugged features bore the exhaustion of countless battles, but his eyes burned with determination. "The network isn't just a relic of the past. It's a weapon, one that could tip the balance of this war. But it's more dangerous than you realize." Lethea sheathed her blade slowly, her distrust of him still simmering. "Dangerous to whom? The Unity? My people? Or all of us?" "All of us," Dax said simply. "The builders of this network didn't just create weapons. They created something alive, a system that thinks, learns, and adapts. If the Unity gains control of even one node, they'll have access to the rest. And once the network wakes up fully, it won't care who started this war. It'll see us all as a threat." The weight of his words settled over the group, the silence broken only by the faint hum of the ruins. Vedran, still alert and wary, stepped forward. If what he's saying is true, then we can't leave this place standing. We should destroy it now and ensure the Unity never gets their hands on it. And trigger a chain reaction that could destabilize this entire moon, Dax countered sharply. These structures are interconnected. Destroying one node recklessly could activate others, or worse, wake up the network completely. Lithia's gaze shifted between the two men. Her instincts told her to trust no one, yet the gravity of their situation left no room for hesitation. Then what do you propose, Dax? What's the alternative? The answer came in the form of a revelation Lithia hadn't expected. Dax reached into a compartment on his battered armor and pulled out a small crystalline device. It glowed faintly, its light resonating with the glyphs around them. This is a disruptor key, he explained. It's designed to sever the connection between nodes without triggering the network. I've used it before, but the process is dangerous. Dangerous how? Lithia pressed. He hesitated, the first crack in his composed exterior. The disruptor draws power directly from the node. It destabilizes the core, temporarily, but if the process is interrupted... He didn't finish, but the implication was clear. And you were just carrying this with you? Vedran asked, his tone laced with suspicion. Convenient, don't you think? Dax met his gaze evenly. I've been hunting these ruins for years. The Unity isn't the first faction to try exploiting them, and they won't be the last. My orders were to neutralize as many nodes as possible before they became a threat, but I can't do it alone. Lithia crossed her arms, her mind racing. Why us, Dax? Why reveal this to us now? Because I saw what you did back there, he said, his voice quieter now, almost respectful. You didn't abandon your people. You didn't run when the Sentinel came for you. That tells me you're willing to make the hard choices, and that's exactly what we need to do if we're going to stop this. The hard choice came sooner than she expected. As Dax worked to configure the disruptor key, Lithia's team spread out, securing the chamber against the possibility of more Unity reinforcements. But the ruins had grown more unstable, their energy flaring unpredictably. The glyphs on the walls now moved faster, their light almost blinding. Vedran approached her, his expression grave. Commander, we've detected movement outside. Unity reinforcements are closing in. If they breach the chamber, we'll be trapped. Lithia nodded, her jaw tightening. How much time do we have? Minutes at best. She turned to Dax, who was hunched over the disruptor, his hands moving with practiced precision. How much longer? Not long, he replied without looking up. But I'll need someone to maintain the stabilizer manually. It's the only way to ensure the disruptor doesn't overload. Lithia's stomach sank. And what happens to the person maintaining it? Dax's silence was answer enough. When the Unity breached the outer perimeter, the chamber became a battlefield once more. Plasma fire lit the air as Lithia's team fought desperately to hold the line, their numbers dwindling against the relentless assault. Amid the chaos, Lithia made her choice. Dax, she called, her voice cutting through the noise. I'll hold the stabilizer. He looked up sharply, his expression a mix of surprise and protest. Number, I can do it. You need to lead your team out of here. My team will follow my orders, she said firmly. And my orders are to finish this mission. You're the only one who knows how to use the disruptor. That makes you more valuable than me. Vedran grabbed her arm, his voice raw with emotion. Commander, you don't have to do this. We can find another way. There is no other way, she said, meeting his gaze. You know that as well as I do. Get the rest of the team out of here, that's an order. The stabilizer thrummed with a dangerous energy as Lithia took her position. The console was cold beneath her hands, the glyphs shifting wildly as she worked to keep the core in balance. She could feel the power surging through the ruins, a force too vast to fully comprehend. Dax activated the disruptor, its crystalline light merging with the chamber's glow. The air grew heavier, the energy crackling around them like a storm barely contained. "You're almost there," he said, his voice steady but urgent. "Just a little longer." The Unity forces pushed closer, their relentless assault threatening to overwhelm Vadran and the remaining soldiers. Lithia's arms burned with the effort of holding the stabilizer in place, but she refused to falter. The disruptor emitted a high-pitched whine, its light intensifying until the entire chamber was bathed in white. The ruins shuddered violently, the energy within them reaching a deafening crescendo. And then, silence. The glyphs dimmed, their movements ceasing. The chamber grew still, the oppressive energy dissipating as the disruptor completed its work. Lithia staggered back from the console, her vision swimming. She turned to see Dax, his expression a mix of relief and exhaustion. "It's done," he said. "The node is offline. For now." Vadran approached, bloodied but alive. "Commander, we have to go. More Unity forces are inbound." Lithia nodded, her body aching but her resolve unbroken. "Then let's move." As they fled the ruins, Lithia couldn't shake the feeling that their victory was only temporary. The mysteries of the network still loomed large, and she knew their fight was far from over. But for now, they had bought themselves time, and in a war like this, time was everything. The storm-tossed skies of the moon had finally calmed, their constant turmoil fading into an eerie stillness. Lithia stood at the mouth of the ruins, her breath forming ghostly clouds in the cool, damp air. Behind her, the faint hum of the deactivated node resonated like a heartbeat that had gone still. The battle was over, but its echoes remained. Distant plasma bursts and muffled explosions reminded her that the Unity forces had not yet retreated entirely. Her team was battered, exhausted, but alive. A fragile victory, carved from the jaws of certain defeat. Vadran approached her, his gait uneven as he cradled a wound to his side. His eyes, usually sharp with defiance or determination, held something softer now. "Commander, the remaining Unity forces are withdrawing. Whatever we did here, it worked. For now." Lithia nodded, her gaze lingering on the horizon. The faint, distant shimmer of Unity dropships ascending into the dark sky gave her no comfort. She knew their retreat was not a surrender, but a recalibration. The war was far from over. Inside the ruins, Captain Dax Rain was making final adjustments to the disruptor key. The crystalline device, now inert, rested in his hands like an artifact of some ancient myth. Its light was gone, its purpose fulfilled, for now. "You could destroy it," Lithia said as she entered the chamber, her voice cutting through the heavy silence. Dax glanced up at her, his expression unreadable. "I could, but that would mean destroying the knowledge that might one day save us." "And what about the knowledge that could destroy us?" she countered. He sighed, setting the disruptor down carefully on the console. "This isn't just about the war between your people and the Unity. The network was never meant for us. It's older than any of our histories, and we barely understand it. But one thing is certain, it's waking up. We've delayed it, maybe even bought ourselves years, but eventually it will demand to be reckoned with." Lithia stepped closer, her eyes narrowing. "You've been chasing this for years. Why? What aren't you telling me, Dax?" He hesitated, the weight of unspoken truths visible in the set of his jaw. Finally, he spoke. "Because I've seen what happens when the network fully activates. Years ago, my team stumbled upon another node, a smaller one, isolated. We didn't know what it was, but we triggered it. For 3 days, the sky burned. Entire colonies vanished, consumed by storms of energy. We barely escaped, and even now, I don't know why." The admission hung heavy in the air, the enormity of it pressing down on them both. "And you think that will happen here?" Lithia asked, her voice steady but low. "Not yet," Dax said. "But if the Unity, or anyone else, tries to harness this power without understanding it, history will repeat itself." Back at the temporary encampment, Lithia's team regrouped. The survivors sat in weary silence, their injuries tended as best as the limited supplies allowed. Vedran moved among them, offering quiet words of encouragement, though his own exhaustion was plain to see. Lithia joined them, taking a seat beside Vedran. For a moment, neither spoke, the weight of the day pressing too heavily for words. Finally, Vedran broke the silence. "You made the right call in there, Commander. Not everyone would have stayed behind to stabilize the core." She gave a faint, weary smile. "It wasn't bravery, Vedran. It was necessity. If we hadn't stopped that node, we wouldn't be here now." "And what about Rain?" Vedran asked, his tone cautious. "Do you trust him?" Lithia considered the question, her gaze drifting toward the ruins. "Trust is too strong a word, but I believe he wants the same thing we do, a galaxy that doesn't burn itself to ashes. For now, that's enough." As dawn broke over the moon's jagged horizon, the remnants of Lithia's team prepared to leave. Their mission was complete, but the scars it left, both visible and unseen, would linger. Dax stood apart from the group, his solitary figure silhouetted against the rising sun. Lithia approached him, her steps slow and deliberate. "What now?" she asked. He turned to face her, his expression thoughtful. "I'll keep moving. There are other nodes out there, other threats. If we're lucky, I'll find a way to stop this before it starts again." "And if you don't?" He met her gaze, the weight of his burden clear in his eyes. "Then I hope someone else will." Lithia studied him for a moment, then extended her hand. "If you find something, anything, let us know. My people may not trust you, but they'll listen to me. We're stronger together than apart." Dax hesitated, then took her hand. His grip was firm, but there was a weariness to it that mirrored her own. "Good luck, Commander," he said quietly. "And to you, Captain." As their ship ascended into orbit, Lithia looked out at the scarred surface of the moon. The ruins below were barely visible now, their secrets hidden once more. But she knew they were not gone. The network, the war, the alliances and betrayals, they were all part of a larger puzzle, one she was only beginning to understand. Vedran joined her at the viewport, his expression somber. "Do you think we made a difference?" She thought of the Sentinel, of the lives lost and the truths revealed. She thought of Dax, of the Unity forces retreating to plan their next move. "I think we bought the galaxy time," she said finally. "And sometimes that's all you can do." As the stars stretched into streaks of light and the ship jumped to hyperspace, Lithia felt a strange mix of exhaustion and resolve. The war was far from over, but the battle for the ruins had given her something she hadn't felt in a long time, hope. And in a galaxy teetering on the edge of chaos, hope was the most powerful weapon of all.